Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And I just want to remind everyone, we do have a Facebook page out there where we post some stuff from our episodes and links and pictures and videos and things that we think you would find interesting. So head over there to facebook.com/no name music cast. That's facebook.com/no name music cast. Okay, so this week is my turn to pick the topic. And I had a topic in mind, but our dear friend of the podcast, Jilbo, made a suggestion to me about a week ago, or maybe a little bit longer, I can't remember. So I've decided to take heed of her suggestion. So this one's for you, Jilbo. And this episode is called Rock and Roll Road Trip.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, this isn't like an exhaustive list of every rock and roll themed place I've ever been to ever, though I'm very lucky that I have traveled widely and seen a lot of cool stuff. But I've just gone through my archives and just pulled out a few places which I thought would make some interesting stories and interesting discussions for the pod.
So it's not going to be every, what's the restaurant you eat at everywhere?
Hard Rock Cafe.
It's not every Hard Rock Cafe you've been to, right, Tim?
No, and in fact, I'm actually, as I was looking through my pictures, I noticed that the good bulk of these trips are based around Hard Rock Cafe.
To everyone who doesn't know this, Tim has an extensive list of Hard Rock Cafes he has attended. That's why I asked. All right.
Yeah, so I may do a Hard Rock episode at some point in the future, but for now, this week is a Rock and Roll Road Trip. So I'm opening up the Rock and Roll Road Trip.
Okay.
And this was a place that I went to in 2009 in Northampton. And Northampton is somewhere that's about 60 miles north of London. It's about halfway to Manchester, Birmingham. Actually, probably closer to halfway to Birmingham, to be honest.
Okay.
Okay. And we went to a shoe museum in Northampton.
Like where they make shoes?
No, where they display shoes.
Okay. Well, so it's a museum. I thought I was thinking like a factory tour. Never mind. I'm already on it today. So you were looking at shoes, and I'm guessing there was some celebrity shoes in this museum? That's
correct. In fact, the whole reason we went to the Northampton Shoe Museum, it was one of these sort of highbrow museums that was built with lottery money, because like in England, we only got the lottery in the 90s, and a lot of the money got funneled off into charities. And rather than I'm sure some money went to worthy charities, but a lot of it went to sort of arty stuff. And they were criticized a lot at the time that these lottery grants were going to things that were not necessarily deemed essential.
So in America, at least in Virginia, I'm only going to speak of Virginia because it varies state to state, our lottery money actually supports the public school system. So that's pretty cool. We don't always do everything great, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think maybe the UK lottery money does go to better things. And there was some talk that I think Richard Branson wanted to run the lottery initially, and he said he was going to give all the profits to the NHS. But of course, some other consortium one, and Camelot, I think, got it. I don't know if they still have it, but that's how it was. And they had all these arts grants and things. Anyway, this shoe museum came from a lottery arts grant. So as you would imagine, it has many types of footwear over the years and things like that. But more importantly, the reason we went there, do you remember in the film Tommy by The Who?
Yeah.
You've seen that? Mm-hmm. You've seen the pinball wizard scene with Elton John?
I already knew that's where this was going, yes.
Yes, and he has those super high Doc Marten boots. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so guess what? There? Yeah, guess what? They are there. And the way that they have it set up is that when you sort of walk the corner where they are, and they're on top of like a cabinet, and there's a big picture of Elton John from the film, and then the boots are there. And as you move the corner, there's like a sensor, and it kicks off the Elton John doing Pinball Wizard.
So what's cool though is as soon as I was going to make a joke. Well, were Elton John's boots there? Because you were making the Europe and then as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, I missed the Pinball Wizard. I know it. Anyway, so no, that's fantastic. So when you're saying charities, I'm going to go back to what we were saying before, because the boots were cool, but I have a question. Mm-hmm. So are these rich people who had the boots and sold them to the lottery, basically, and then the lottery put them. How does that logistically work?
I don't know actually who owns the boot. I mean, I think the museum may own the boots now. I would imagine they've probably passed hands a few times through various collectors and things like that. And I would imagine the money that they got for setting up this museum, they was able to purchase them. Or sometimes you find a rich collector will buy memorabilia like that, and then they loan it to a museum so everyone can see it.
So I do know that Lady Gaga bought a bunch of Michael Jackson's like tour clothes. Like she has like a Thriller jacket, a glove. I know she was talking about it on some different interviews, and she doesn't display them, but she keeps them in it's like a warehouse, but it's temperature controlled to keep them in pristine condition. Mm-hmm. And she says her goal is that not that she's like in there, like, what, she doesn't touch them. Kind of like, when you go in Europe and you're in like, I don't know about you, but when I was like in different venues and stuff in Europe, if you touch anything like you're not supposed to, there's some security guard who comes screaming at you from a distance. You're not allowed to take pictures because they don't want you to mess up any old historical things. Mm-hmm. She doesn't let anybody in the warehouse. She keeps it in like the perfect temperature. I guess there's like a specific temperature you're supposed to keep clothing at. Mm-hmm. She said her goal is not that she's like in there wanting to be all over it, it's that it can be preserved. So when she passes, Michael Jackson's clothes could then be passed on and be used maybe in a museum or something. Because, he went through all that kind of monetary issues, and I think there was some worry about some of his stuff getting sold off. So she bought it for that reason instead of just like letting it go out into the atmosphere. Yeah,
absolutely. It's like the Apollo spacesuit that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. The Smithsonian have that now, and if it's on display, but the way that it's lit with special lights that won't fade any of the colors on the patches or anything, and it has to be temperature controlled, and there's a special process where some of the materials it's made from perish over time, so they have to put some gas in there, or it's a whole thing. But there's a whole preservation aspect.
What is that one in what's not the French, not the Paris Opera House, but Chateau, what is that one you go to, and it's basically just a big open building in Paris, and the roofs are done in like that really good artwork. Oh my God, it's a really famous thing in my mind. It's like, it doesn't matter. Anyway, when you go to Europe and you're just kind of like on one of those flashback tours, you're like thrown all these different really art things, and you know what I mean, Tim? It all becomes a whirlwind. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there was one that we were at, and you weren't allowed to take pictures. Well, some dude beside me, and I don't think he spoke English. So you know how like you've got, when you're in those type things, think like the Louvre. This wasn't the Louvre, but think like the Louvre. You've got 37,000 people around you, and everybody speaks a different language, right? Well, there's like about 1,000 signs in every language saying, don't take a picture, don't take a picture, don't take a picture. You're not allowed to take pictures. Dude beside me takes a picture and uses flash. Oh. So I'm standing there and a security guard comes bolting out. He grabbed the guy's camera and crushed it on the wall and just walked off. And we all just kind of stood there like frozen.
Oh dear.
That happened while I was in France. But it's because it was, from like the 1600s type thing. So they didn't want anything to get destroyed. But I just was shocked. He didn't say anything. He just picked the guy's camera up, crushed it on the wall, and walked off.
There's a museum in Danville, Virginia. There's a tank museum. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been to the tank museum?
I know what you're talking. But okay, anyway, we went from Paris to Danville. If you live in Virginia, you'll understand that. Continue, Tim.
Yeah. Well, there's a museum in Danville, which is a tank museum. And it's, as you would imagine, it's like this big warehouse full of tanks and military memorabilia, but mostly tanks. And, I like a quirky museum, so we went to Danville one time, and there's big signs everywhere saying that you can take pictures, but no flash photography, because apparently the flashes will deteriorate these huge military made of steel machines.
So a grenade being thrown at it, or even a flashbang or a claymore is not going to destroy the tank. But if I take a picture with my Polaroid with the flash on, the tank is going to disintegrate, is what you're telling me.
That's what I'm saying. So basically what I'm saying, if for any folks out in the military out there, don't worry about guns or grenades or bombs. What you need is an Instamatic.
Fantastic. They have another one down in South Carolina. Fort Bragg is in North Carolina, because I come from a military family. Fort Bragg is in North Carolina, and then you got Fort Sumner across in South Carolina. But Fort Bragg has one of the biggest, museums because it's like the home of the Rangers and all this stuff. And so you can go, and I've been there a million times over with my family. And my aunt is actually the first woman who passed Ranger school, though she never got her Green Beret just because of the timing. Unfortunately, that was what she wasn't allowed to. But she's actually got her little section there. So we've been a few times and went and saw her. But I've never seen anything that said you can't take a picture of a tank. Just saying.
Well, there you go. Maybe only tanks stored in Danville, Virginia, deteriorate with a.
I think everything in Danville, Virginia, is deteriorating, but that's not related. Sorry if you live in Danville, but you know. All right, move along, Tim. What's next?
Okay, so thinking about museums and thinking about Michael Jackson clothing, the next place which I'm going to say on this rock and roll road trip is where the last time I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, which was 2017, the last time I went there. I have been 2 or 3 times to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But the last time I went was probably the best visit I had. They did have some, like as I said, some Michael Jackson stage clothes there. I think they may have had a glove as well while I was there. But the main reason I'm mentioning the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as well as all the cool other memorabilia that they had a Beatles display there. And in that Beatles display, they had Ringo Starr's #1 Ludwig drum kit. Now, this is a drum kit that he played all the way through the Beatles. Whenever you see the Beatles playing, and he has that kind of grey mottled colour Ludwig drum kit.
It doesn't have the top, like tom drums or whatever?
Well, it has the toms, but I don't think it has the skins on the bottom. However he set it up.
Okay.
They have that kit there. It's on loan from Ringo Starr, and it says on loan from Richard and Barbara Starkey. That's what it says on the little thing, which is their real name.
That's so cute. So yeah, because I always remember his drum set, and this is just me remembering from concerts. He's got his big bass drum. And then I felt like, because you've got your floor tom over here, you've got your snare, your hi-hat, your crash cymbals, whatever you had. But I really don't remember him having toms on the top, or if he did, he only had one. Maybe he had a weird setup, because usually you've got at least double toms right here, so if you're doing a roll across, you can do that. Then you got your floor tom. But I always distinctly remember his setup was different than most artists.
Yeah, and in fact, I've got the picture here. So he has a bass drum, a floor tom, a snare, and then he has one rack tom.
That's what it is. So it's only one. I was, because I'm used to having 2. So it just, for some reason, that always stood out to me. But then again, if you think about it, most Beatles music, not really going to require a tom like that. I'm just going to say it's going to be mostly a snare and a hi-hat and a 4 count with a bass drum. That's most Beatles music. It's true.
Exactly. And the other cool thing that they had there was the Mellotron, if you're familiar with what a Mellotron is.
I have no idea what that is.
So a Mellotron is before they invented synthesizers, or before synthesizers were an actual thing. Okay. What a Mellotron was, it was a keyboard, so it looked like a keyboard or like an organ, but when you pressed the key down, it spun a little wheel, and on that wheel was tape, like you would get in a reel-to-reel recorder.
I've seen that. I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so when you press the key down, it actually spins the thing, and then you could record, the manufacturer would record something on that tape. So you could trigger different sounds on the keyboard using the Mellotron. Now, the Mellotron that they have is used on a lot of Beatles songs, and it's the one that's used on Strawberry Fields famously.
Which makes sense because it does have that synthesizer sound. No, I can physically see what you're talking about. I've seen it, but I didn't know what the name was.
Exactly. And equally, I took a photograph of a double neck guitar belonging to Metallica, and my flash fired off, and somebody ran out and asked me not to use the flash, please.
But they didn't take your phone and crush it against the wall, right?
No, they didn't. It was just like, I'm sorry, can you just turn the flash off? And I was like, yes, I can. Thank you very much.
They were very serious about that when I was in Greece, too, with all the Greek stuff.
Yeah, I think if the odd flash photo here and here would probably be fine, but I think it's over time. Yeah, it would wash it out and deteriorate it.
I just think that security guard was having a bad day and took all of his anger out on that poor guy's camera. And I just imagine like his entire vacations film was on this one camera.
Oh dear.
Now it's gone. That is pretty cool, though. I haven't been. I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame probably like 2013. So you've been after me, and I definitely don't remember seeing that specifically because that would have stuck out because I mean it's a Beatles drum set. But I will say I can distinctly see Ringo Starr's drum set from a mile away. It's very iconic, and he always played it a very specific way. We've talked about Ringo's drumming, but you can see the way he always looked. He also had a facial expression too when he was playing. Very, very distinct.
Exactly. Well, it's all about peace and love. That's what it is.
Oh, Ringo. He's such a nice guy.
He was 82 recently.
Good Lord. He doesn't look 82.
No, he's doing
very well.
It's all the peace and love. That's what it is.
It's probably because I think he's like a hardcore vegan or something, right?
I think so. And plus, I mean, he's had a very good life, so.
Yeah, if I had the money he had, I'd probably look that good at 82.
Peace and love, peace and love. Okay, so the next stop on the rock and roll road trip, we're going to go to Salem, Virginia.
I've been there before.
Yep, Salem, Virginia. For those who don't know Salem, it's on I-81 North going towards Roanoke. Now, I understand for our friends who live in Camberley or something, that doesn't make a lot of doesn't mean a lot to them, but we live near a big road called 81, which is like the equivalent of the M3, sort of. It's that kind of idea. So the next stop is we're going to Salem, and the reason we're going to Salem is in 2011 I hadn't lived around here for very long, and I had the opportunity to see another titan of rock and roll, one of the greats, one of the big names in the world of rock. And he was performing with the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra, as you would imagine you would be. And I saw Billy Ocean.
Okay, that's random. I had no idea where that was going, but I guess if you're playing with an orchestra, it would make sense that Billy Ocean is playing with an orchestra because he's kind of got that sound.
That's true. And what happened, apparently, is that somebody who was involved with the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra is like a donor of the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra, really loves Billy Ocean. So they paid for Billy Ocean and his band to come and do this gig at the Salem Civic Center. Now, the funny thing was, I bought tickets thinking this was just like a gig like any other gig. So we get there and we find the middle of the for those who don't know, the Salem Civic Center is the same kind of idea as Wembley Arena, sort of. It's smaller, but it's the same principle where you have the stage at one end, obviously, and then you have an area which can either be seating or standing, and then you have the seats around the outside. Mm-hmm. So we bought tickets and we couldn't get anything down on the bottom, but we got the seats around the outside. So we went along thinking this was just going to be a normal gig, but he happened to be performing with the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra. We get there and we find it's like some fancy, posh affair where only those in the know could get the tickets in the ground area. And
this is the guy who sings Caribbean Queen, right?
Correct, yeah. And down on the ground were like these big round tables, and all these people, like to-do people from the Roanoke and surrounding area who had to be in the know to get these tickets. It was like it was like a bring a picnic affair. So everyone came in with like these picnic baskets and champagne and Stilton and...
Okay, this is just so weird to me because we're talking about the guy who sings Caribbean Queen and Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car.
Correct.
I don't associate him. I mean, he does have a kind of like a grandiose sound, so I see how he could work with an orchestra, but I don't associate it with highbrow picnics.
No, and neither did we. So we sat down and we were observing this whole scene and like, this is really weird. And then two things happened. One, down in the ground around one of these tables, we saw Robin Reed, and you know who that is.
Yeah, he's a news anchor.
WDBJ7 news anchor and weatherman, which is weird. And it's like, oh, that's Robin Reed. And then some snooty lady walked past, like because we was up a bit, but it was lady walked past, and we overheard her saying, yeah, these kind of things, they're not for those people. like pointing up to where we were.
Okay, I just need to establish this guy sings a song that's when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Yes.
Is anybody else like getting this? I mean, I understand it's an orchestra, but you could really do any song with an orchestra. It's just a form of music. Like I was saying, he has that broad voice, but like, I mean, the guy sings a song when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Like, it's not like we're talking about Frank Sinatra. I mean, I just get. Also, when you talk about Billy Ocean, this will make you laugh too, Tim. I always think of a scene. There's a Family Guy episode where there's a whale. No, he's not a whale. What is he? He's not a seal. He's a dolphin. Mm-hmm. And his name is Billy. And it only dawned on me recently. He's Billy the Ocean, but because he's a dolphin. Sorry, not related, but it makes the story funny because, like, I'm just saying, I mean, no offense to, I mean, I like Billy Ocean. He's fine. But, I mean, the guy who sings Caribbean Queen is not the one I associate with the highbrow picnic.
It was an odd pairing. And as I said, we found out after, as I said, it was one of the donors for the Roanoke Symphony Orchestra really loves Billy Ocean and then made a large donation to make this concert happen. And the best part was, all the way through it, Billy Ocean kept saying, "Thank you, Roanoke," until somebody told him almost at the end, "You're in Salem, not Roanoke."
Well, I do know a fact about Billy Ocean. So mark that off your cards out there if you're playing bingo. Here's a trivia fact for you. His real name is Leslie Sebastian Charles. Oh, so that sounds way fancier than Billy Ocean. Maybe you should have went by that for the picnic.
Yeah, I mean, even if he was called Leslie Charles, I mean, that's a cool name.
Well, my husband's name is Charles Leslie.
Oh.
I didn't even think about that. Charlie's full name is Charles Leslie Thompson III. There you go. Charlie, you have a really fancy name, bud.
Marvelous.
But I'm just saying, if you went by Leslie Sebastian Charles, I might have understood what there was a fancy, I don't know. It is really humorous. That's like if you walk into I don't know, I'm trying to think of an artist. Like if I'm at a Billy Ray Cyrus concert, I'm not exactly thinking people are going to pull out all the stops like with the champagne. I'm expecting more of a Bud Light situation.
Yeah.
And I understand it's an orchestra. It was probably supposed to be fancy and yada, yada, yada. But it is kind of weird. I'm not going to lie, Tim. That's weird. All right.
Well, there we go. Well, let's get back in the car and let's leave Salem. And our rock and roll road trip is now going to take us to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Now, Lancaster, Pennsylvania is famous for being a community of Amish people. True. So doing what anyone would do when you're in Lancaster, Hannah and I exclusively listened to Weird Al Yankovic's Amish Paradise on a loop all the time that we was in Lancaster.
Of course you did.
Which is the rock and roll connection for this particular stop.
That's fair enough. I've been to Lancaster, and I've actually been to Amish, like some of the Amish stores. That's really cool is if you go up to Lancaster, so they've got right outside like the major area, they've got a lot of like Amish. They've got like stands. I don't know if you saw them, Tim, like on the side of the road where they're selling like Amish blank. It's all handmade stuff. And it's kind of how some of the Amish people get their money, I guess, probably. Generate it somehow, but you can get like food, you can get blankets, you can get dolls. And what's creepy is their dolls don't have faces because they think that's vanity. I don't know if you saw any of the creepy dolls. No offense if you're Amish, but I don't think you Amish are listening to our podcast. It could be wrong.
Well, I don't know a great deal about the Amish people, but I know what Weird Al says in his song, and they shun fancy things like electricity. So I don't think they would have the equipment necessary to listen to a podcast.
And I'm not insulting them if they're happy and that's what they want to do. That's fine. But they don't believe in vanity. Like they think like having your face on a doll and stuff is like vain. I don't know what the thing is there, but so like if you go to these little stands on the side of the road in Lancaster, they'll have like a little hat and a little dress on, and the face will just be blank. And no matter how hard you try, it's creepy. It's creepy.
Yeah. I would say dolls in general are creepy, but one without a face on it is super creepy.
Oh, I'm going to bring the road trip home, Tim. Here, this is not related to music, but it's related to creepy dolls. So there is so Tim talks about, I'll make it related to music. Tim talks about there's a local store, we call it the NCAP, that he likes to buy his CDs from. Mm-hmm. And they do really good for the area. Well, they have a secondary store on what's known as Roanoke Street, ironically, Roanoke again, near us, that does like the big furniture and stuff. And so this is a secondhand store that does a lot of good in our community. They actually have our some of our community services and then people to there, and they don't have money. They give them little tickets and they can get stuff. So anyway, moral story is me and Charlie went perusing one day, and we went into the one that has all the furniture. They have an entire creepy section of porcelain dolls that is like set up for Christmas and for Halloween and for I'll have to find the video. I will have to find the video and put it on the page. When I say it's next, and I'm not one who's easily scared by dolls. I think some people get a little, but I'm usually not. I mean, it was stacks and stacks and stacks, and they made scenes out of them. There was like a Mother Teresa standing, like laying on the ground at one point, holding another baby doll. It was so weird. And I recorded a video of it. I'm going to have to post it. Not that it has anything to do with music, but it's very creepy.
I've been in there a couple of times. Their CD selection is not good, and luckily I didn't see the doll selection.
Oh, God, don't go. It's around, like, you have to go all the way kind of towards it. And this is close to Christmas time, and they had a bunch of Christmas stuff set up, so it could have been that. But I will find that video. I will search high and low, because it is weird. So if you come to our area on a road trip, don't go to that store. It's the moral of the story.
Yeah, go to the other one that's at the bottom of downtown, because it doesn't have creepy dolls.
It doesn't have creepy dolls, and I donate all my plastic bags to them.
There we go.
All right, where's the road trip going?
Okay, so we're going to get back in the car. We said hello to our friends in the Amish community, and we got back in the car. And this time, we've gone to New York City. Now, I've been to New York City a number of times, and there's lots of cool stuff to do. But I would say I was lucky enough to experience this twice. So I think I mentioned this on the podcast maybe 10 episodes ago or so. But I was lucky enough to see Les Paul at the Iridium. Now, Les Paul being the guy who invented the solid body electric guitar, and he also invented multi-track recording. Now, when I saw him, I saw him in 2004. And he was in his early 90s, and then I saw him in 2009, and he was in his late 90s at that point. I would say that his playing in 2009 was actually better than in 2004. And to literally be in the same room and eventually meet the man that invented the solid body electric guitar is just unbelievable. And he would tell these stories, like unbelievable stories, and he'd be like, well, me and Django Reinhardt in 32, we was in Paris, and then we did this, and then blah, blah. It's just, I mean, you wouldn't matter if he didn't even play a note. It was just the stories that he would tell.
And wasn't his like original prototype called the Log?
That's correct. Yeah, it was an well, originally what he wanted was a railway sleeper because he liked the way it sustained, but it was too heavy and you couldn't play it. So he had an Epiphone guitar that he took the neck off it, and then he connected the neck to like a big piece of wood as a prototype. And then he had some like semi-acoustic guitar sides he screwed to it. And he was going to go into business with Leo Fender originally, but it didn't work out. So he ended up working with Gibson, and then the Gibson Les Paul guitar was born.
So, and he has and this I did see when I was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he has a permanent display at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like they have a whole section for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only, as I said, the electric guitar thing is groundbreaking enough, but he basically invented multi-track recording. The system that he came up with. Whereas, like, if you record on tape in a studio, certainly in the analog realm, there'll be a number of tracks. So there might be 8 tracks, 16 tracks, 32 tracks, and you can record on each one separately. What Les pioneered was an early form of that called sound on sound, where you would maybe only have one track, and then you'd record on it, and then you would record audio on top of the existing recording, and then you would build your recording from there.
Like overdubbing or something like that. Is that what it's called, overdubbing?
Basically. And the other interesting fact about Les is that he didn't have the money to buy a second tape machine, because what he had to do was buy a second tape machine, tear the recording head off, and put it on a second machine to create the sound on sound thing. So That's Bing Crosby bankrolled him to buy a second tape machine.
What a big bankroll that was. Here's your second steak machine.
Well, I'd imagine in 1941 or whenever he was doing this, a tape machine was probably outside the realm of any normal person.
So it's not really related to, I've been in New York plenty of times, and I've been to a couple of different places in New York. I have not specifically been where Tim is talking about, but one thing I do know about him in his early career is I watched a documentary. He played at like he performed country music, weirdly enough, it's because he's done like jazz, R&B. I think he did a little bit of everything. I could be wrong, but he played at the World Fair, one of the first like World Fairs in America, the Chicago World Fair. So he was playing there. It was somebody else. I can't remember what his name was, but that was one of his first big pieces. Was he went out and played at the World Fair. And weirdly enough, it's not really a big deal in America anymore. But the World Fair was pretty famous to make a lot of musicians, artists, circus people popular in America. And there was things invented at the World Fair. It's kind of strange, but that was a big deal for us back in the 30s.
Yeah, he was probably with Mary Ford, who was his wife at the time, and they used to perform together. It was always Les Paul and Mary Ford. Originally, I think when he was a country artist, he was known as Rhubarb Red. His real name is not Les Paul; it's Lester William Polfus. But Les Paul is his stage name.
Yeah, I know they talked about, he's associated with Bing Crosby, the Andrews sisters at some point, and they were all played at the Chicago World Fair that year. So it was a big year for them. But that's specifically I watched a whole documentary about it, and they talked a lot about that's where he got his start. And then it went on a big thing about that's how a lot of musicians got started back then. But I guess it makes sense because, you don't have the idea of radio. Well, you do have radio, but not the way we think of it. And you don't have TV and you don't have social media. So how else are you going to get known?
Exactly. It was the MySpace of the day.
Now, Mary Ford, what do I know? Obviously, she was married to him.
Well, she was a singer. I don't know much about Mary Ford other than the fact that she's associated with Les Paul. And then what happened is that they got divorced, and his deal with Gibson for royalties on guitars was linked into that divorce. So he briefly disassociated himself with Gibson, and it was around the time they discontinued the Les Paul guitar and made it into the SG guitar, which is the kind of guitar which Angus Young from AC/DC plays. And then after all the divorce business had settled, he rejoined Gibson, and then they picked up making the Les Paul guitar again.
Interesting. He died in like 2009 now?
Yeah, it wasn't long after I saw him. I remember we'd been back for a while, and then we heard the news that Les had died. He was, for an old fella, he was so spry in the mind. Him getting on and off stage, you could tell he was a very, very old man, very frail man. But when they sat him down and put a guitar on him and he started talking and playing it, you'd never know.
Well, he had to be in, 90s?
Yeah, he was in his late 90s when he died.
Okay. Where's the road trip taking us now?
Okay, our road trip is getting in the car, and then we're going to the airport, and then we're crossing the sea, and we are heading to Winchester.
Okay.
And just outside Winchester is a place called Watership Down. Are you familiar with the film Watership Down?
Yes. Actually, I am. That's what I was getting ready to ask.
Yeah, with the rabbits and everything, and a song that's sung by Art Garfunkel.
Yes.
Yeah, bright eyes, all that business. Yeah. So we decided we had a trip away. We stayed in Basingstoke because that's a great place to stay, obviously. And then we went to
I know that.
Yeah, on the way to Winchester, we went to Watership Down, and Watership Down is really just like a sort of a hill field type thing. Okay,
but was it based off of a book? Was the movie based off of a book?
I think so. I think that's where it originally came from.
So it's just a giant field where the bunny and the whatever it was that was singing at me is that? Like it's just a big green place?
Yeah, pretty much. We looked it up on the map and turned a corner, and then there was like some rolling hills in the background, and that was Watership Down. But the best part was, on walking to it, you walked through like sort of some little country residential roads, and there was a number of houses which had little stone rabbits outside their houses.
That's so cute. Because I would say that movie came out in the 70s, the cartoon version.
I think so, yeah. I remember there used to be a UK TV show called TISWAS. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't. I think it stood for this. This is Saturday Watch and See, I think is what it stood for. But anyhow, it was one of these kids' TV programs that was for kids, but was really probably pitched for adults, even though it was on a Saturday morning.
Gotcha.
And the show was like complete anarchy. It was full of kids, and they had a guy called the Phantom Flanflinger throwing shaving foam custard pies around. They had people in a cage that they throw buckets of water on, and they were trying to do a TV show while all this anarchy was going on.
Sounds very British to me.
Yeah, I've got one episode of TISWAS, the 1981 Christmas special that we watch every year, but it ran for a number of years, and it was a thing. But anyway, my point being, I remember it being out when that was out because they used to have a little kid that used to sing an incredibly bad version of Bright Eyes.
That's so great. That whole story was incredibly random. So I went out to England and there was a big field and I remember there were singing rabbits there. But when I went near the houses, they also had rabbits on their little I don't know why, but I had no idea where that story was going. It took a whole nother thing. But that whole concept of like people trying to do stuff while somebody's throwing pies at them sounds like something I would see on an English TV show. I'm just going to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I said we watch this episode every Christmas, the one that I have. And I've got it because it was on an old videotape when growing up, and I preserved it digitally. And I don't know, I just watch it as a nostalgia thing every year for Christmas. And you watch it with 2021 eyes, and you think, there's kids running around, there's a lot of electricity in this TV studio, there's a lot of water being thrown around. This is just a catastrophe.
I mean, it's asking for someone to die. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, in this country, like OSHA would be all over it. In England, like the Health and Safety Committee would shut it down. But clearly, in 1981, that was fine.
Well, we went over that whole thing in the last episode about songs that didn't age well. This is an example of a show that didn't age well. Exactly. And we have a few in America that are like that too. That I go back and watch, and I'm like, did we really allow this? Who signed the checks on this? I work at HR and I'm literally dying inside.
But what's funny about TISWAS, one of the co-presenter of TISWAS was a lady called Sally James, and she now runs a school uniform shop in Sandhurst, not far from where Lee Aaron and Barry Browning lived. In fact, just around the corner from their house.
That's all incredibly random. And the fact that you know that is even more random. She runs a school uniform shop right around the corner. All right, Sally James, if you're listening to the podcast, we'd love to have you on.
She doesn't go by Sally James for the school uniform shop. She goes by her maiden name, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay, whatever your maiden name is, Sally, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on. That was the most detailed story about a piece of grass. Okay, I love it, Tim. Where are we going next?
All right, so we're leaving Watership Down. We're heading up to Heathrow. We're getting back on the airplane. And we're going to land in the rock and roll destination, which is Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
So we went to Columbia, South Carolina in 2018. As you do on a day trip when it's like a 4.5-hour drive each way, because, that's something that me and Hannah like to do. And the reason that we went to Columbia, South Carolina was not the rock and roll connection. We went there to see the world's largest fire hydrant.
Of course you did. Fire hydrant, grass, it all makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like this art installation where an artist has made this fire hydrant that's like taller than you could ever imagine. And it's set so it looks like it's busting out the ground.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, and I think originally when it was first installed, it used to spout water, but I think the water feature was either turned off to conserve water or the water feature is broken. But anyhow, it's still there, and it's kind of cool. But the reason I am mentioning Columbia, South Carolina, this particular trip, this particular area is famous because that's where Hootie and the Blowfish came from.
Oh.
They are they are famously a Columbia, South Carolina band.
I did know that, and I do like Hootie and the Blowfish, though I don't care for Darius Rucker by himself. It's kind of meh. And he kind of Is it just me or is Darius Rucker kind of come off as a guy that, like, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to have a beer with him.
I don't know much about him. I know he played at the Harvest not that long ago, and he wasn't he on that country music kick for a while?
Yeah, he was. I don't know, something about him. I've watched him on different TV shows, and just his mannerisms or something about him makes me think that we wouldn't be friends. But that could just be stereotypical. And I like Hootie and the Blowfish. I mean, they're pretty, early. They're a pretty staple 90s band. I mean, I Want to Hold Your Hand is pretty good. I can name a few songs from them, but for some reason, something about Darius Rucker just throws me off. Now, what is the band that's, speaking of bands that are known to be, because like Tim said, I knew that because they're pretty close. 4 hours is, you could go down there, be back home by 10 o'clock if you got up early. But what is the band that's from Virginia, like Northern Virginia, that's an early 90s band?
Dave Matthews Band?
Yeah. True story. Don't know how this relates to Hootie and the Blowfish, but I'm going to tell you a story about the Dave Matthews Band. Whenever I worked at a call center as a supervisor previously, and one of the clients we had was XM Radio. Mm-hmm. Well, Dave Matthews. So when higher up, people would call and they would go to certain, like they'd be routed to a special team or they're supposed to, like Eddie Murphy sometimes and things like that. That was one that we knew had a big XM radio type thing. Mm-hmm. Well, the Dave Matthews Band manager, for some reason, when he called, I guess maybe because he called from a different phone number that was associated with the cat, it did get routed into the right queue. So he just came to a regular employee, and it was at my call center, and that guy was such a jerk. He threw a fit that we could not get. He wanted something done. I don't know, something. It doesn't make sense because it wasn't like it's radio. Like we didn't have to install anything. I can't remember specifically what he wanted, but we couldn't get something activated or do something specifically he wanted. And to this day, it just stands out to me that the Dave Matthews Band are not my favorite because I remember their manager throwing a fit because his XM radio didn't work.
Well, that would be probably why our friends in Hootie and the Blowfish have a art installation and Dave Matthews doesn't.
Not related at all, but I was thinking of people who are local to this area. I don't know why I connected that to that, Tim, but...
But I would like to say that, so when we was in Colombia, we saw the Hootie and the Blowfish art installation.
Oh, okay. So they have a whole art installation?
They have an art installation in downtown Colombia, and it's on Hootie and the Blowfish Boulevard.
Wow, they take Hootie and the Blowfish very seriously. So what is in the art installation?
Well, I'm going to bring the picture up here, and I'm going to describe it for our audio listeners. So okay. It looks like a couple of bare dying trees done in metal.
What?
If you imagine a couple of trees that had lost all their leaves and they were limping because they were like dying, and then imagine that in metal with some other bits hanging off it, and that is a artistic representation of Hootie and the Blowfish. Okay,
I thought it was weird that I associated them with the XM Dave Matthews Band. Weird tangent there. But what the heck does that have to do with Hootie and the Blowfish? Like, it could have at least been a fish. Like a big giant blowfish. Darius Rucker's standing beside. I guess I'm assuming he was Hootie.
Well, I'm gonna post a picture in the Facebook group of the Hootie and the Blowfish art installation. Art is interpretational.
I realized this. I get this, but that's just weird. I thought my brain was weird, but that's weird. This episode's taking a turn. Okay. Now I would love to know who was the art. Okay, I've got to do some research because I need to know who was the artist behind this and what they thought that. Because I mean, it's not like a member of Hootie and the Blowfish probably personally made it.
No, it probably. I don't know. I have no idea. You're going to have to look it up because I remember seeing it and I was thinking, oh, yeah, it looks like a couple of dying trees made out of metal.
Well, and okay, is there a Hootie and the Blowfish song about trees?
Probably. I'm not a big fan. I like their one album, Crack Rear View, and outside of that, I don't really know much about them.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is Only Want to Be With You, I Want to Hold Your Hand and Let Her Cry, which is from Cracked Rear View or whatever. Cracked Rear View, that's what it is.
Yeah, Crack Rear View.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't remember that having anything to do with trees, especially dead trees. Okay, move along. But I do want to know. That is about as random as me talking about the Dave Matthews Band for 2 minutes there. Continue.
Okay, so this rock and roll road trip is continuing. We're back in the car, and this time we're going to Greenbank, West Virginia. Now, Greenbank, we went there in 2016, and Greenbank, West Virginia is famous. This is a particularly tenuous rock and roll connection because I'm talking about radio waves. And, you know, radio waves sometimes have music. But in this case, they don't. But anyhow, there's waves involved. And in Greenbank, West Virginia, it's a huge observatory, radio telescope, absolutely huge radio telescope. But what's interesting about this town, a lot of people, electronics and radio waves and cell phones, well, mobile phones for our friends in England, and all that kind of stuff make people sick. Some people are actually allergic to electronics and radio waves. So Greenbank, West Virginia, because they have this huge observatory, if you live in that town, you're not allowed to have a cell phone. If you have a microwave, you have to put it in a Faraday cage, and you're not allowed to have Wi-Fi. And what's happened is a lot of people who become sick from radio waves move to Greenbank, West Virginia, because it's like a safe haven for that. You can't even get FM radio or anything. It's a complete radio dead spot. And we did the tour of the radio telescope. They take you out to the radio telescope in a diesel vehicle because they said if you have a petrol gasoline engine, the spark plugs firing off actually will affect the radio telescope.
So I've actually been there, Tim, with one place that I've been. And it's outside of like Snowshoe Mountain or whatever.
Yes.
Which I've been, because you can go like snow tubing and all that stuff. It's like a big winter resort area. Mm-hmm. That's right there. And I've been a few times when I was at high school. I went with my church and different things like that. But yeah, no, and it's a big observatory. You could see that I remember you're not allowed to have cell phones. You're not allowed to have Wi-Fi. And they make you turn all that stuff off if you're there. It was like a whole thing. But I went out and it was like 13,000 miles or something. It's huge. But there's like literally nothing else there.
Did you go out and see the actual dish itself, the observatory dish?
The big white thing. It's like basically in the middle of a farm. Looks like kind of.
And the other interesting thing is you're not allowed to take digital photographs of it for the same reason, because apparently a digital camera will mess up the radio telescope. So in the gift shop, they will sell you an old style disposable film camera. So we like taking lots of pictures of our trips. So we bought a film camera and then went to get it developed afterwards at CVS. Now, CVS, for those of our UK friends don't know, is like Boots. It's like Boots the chemist, basically. But they still offer this service. So I took it to the one in Christiansburg, and the grumpy manager, who I don't think he's there anymore, there used to be a grumpy guy who used to be over the CVS that's opposite Kroger. Yeah. And he apparently was supposed to, when you drop it off, you're supposed to pay for it at the same time. But we didn't do that. We just dropped it off. And then we went to pick it up, and it was an entire rigmarole to collect it, because one person said we had to pay for it. One person said we didn't have to pay for it. And then there used to be a really tall dude that used to work in there. And I think he was maybe a college student, and he worked in there part-time, but he knew the deal. And the manager was arguing with somebody, and arguing with somebody was a thing. And I just want my pictures, and I got my card in my hand, and they wouldn't take it, and it was a thing. And this dude come out and said, "It's fine. You ring it up with this code." He said, "It's fine. He didn't pay. We'll just do this and this and just take your card." And he said, "That's $10. There you go. Thank you. Peace."
I appreciate the employee who does that, because I feel like I'm that employee half the time. Just click the button and let them go. That's so funny. It's been years since I've been there. I kind of forgot it existed. Another place that happens. I don't know how much you've been to Washington, D.C., Tim, but when you get close to the Pentagon, your cell phone service and everything goes out because they have transmitters that basically shut them down. Yeah, and the road that leads up.
I know that because I went to Washington, D.C. to visit my friend Hogg for Rough Justice fame when he came to visit a number of years ago. And what's interesting, not only does your phone stop working, most of what central Washington, D.C., GPS does not work.
Yeah. So I lived in Washington, D.C. for a summer for, I don't even want to get to it. Me and Charlie lived there for previous jobs. Doesn't really matter. So I lived there for a summer. I lived outside of Washington in Arlington, but we worked in the city. And I've been back a few times. So I basically know my way around it. But if you get close to the White House or you get close to the Washington Monument or the Pentagon, you'll lose your cell phone service. Your GPS will stop working. It'll start scrambling. And sometimes even, depending on what radio station you're listening to, will go out. The first time, though, so if you're near the Pentagon, and for those who don't know what the Pentagon is, it's like outside of America. It's just think like a big military base type building. It's where most of our military headquarters come out of. So obviously there's an extra level of security. On 9/11, the Pentagon was one of the buildings that was hit, for example. So the Pentagon has some extra security. Well, we were lost. And there's a road that's basically like a do not come here unless you want to get shot road. That's not even a legitimate joke. That's real. So we're lost. Like Tim said, you can't get GPS. We're running in a circle because around the monuments and around the Pentagon, just big giant circle. And traffic in DC is like next level crazy. If you've never been there, think of the worst traffic you can imagine and times it by 10. And so we end up on the road that you're not supposed to go down. And there's a little guy in his little military shack staring at us as we're driving towards the Pentagon. Thankfully, we realized what we were doing and backed up very quickly and left. But yeah, that was the time I almost died.
Well, I'm glad you're here to tell the tale.
Yeah, that happened to me once. But yeah, same thing happens in DC, but theirs is just scramblers for security reasons. It's not for... But what does okay... So I remember going and seeing the radio wave thing, and I remember being in West Virginia, and I kind of remember seeing a giant satellite, and I remember the Wi-Fi, and I remember the cell phone thing. But what are they using the radio waves for? Is there a specific reason that they're there?
Yeah, it's because there's two kinds of several kinds of
It probably sounds really dumb to anybody out there.
There are several kinds of telescopes. There are telescopes that are using optics. Like, I think the Hubble Space Telescope is like that, or a telescope that you would have if you was looking into the sky, where you are bringing in light, and that's what you're looking at. But there's also radio telescopes, where they bring in radio waves, and then they can form images from those radio waves.
Oh, okay, so that's what they're doing. They're being reflected from okay. Everybody out there's going, I thought this was a music podcast, Tim. Let's find something music related. Now that you guys all know how radio waves work.
There we are, see. Well, we're going to leave Greenback, West Virginia, and we're going to go to somewhere back in England, in London, and we are going to go to Abbey Road Studios.
Okay.
In London, in St John's Wood, and we are going to visit the famous Abbey Road crossing. Now, have you ever been to that, Joy?
Actually, weirdly enough, I've been to England, but I've never specifically been to Abbey Road Studios, or I know what the crossing looks like. I saw it from a distance, but I didn't classically walk across the road like everybody else. Okay.
So Hannah and I went, and we went to, because outside of the Abbey Road Studios, there's a big wall outside. And I think originally you're not allowed to write on it, but everybody would sign it. Yeah. And even now, I think on their website a few years ago, they gave up. And even on their website now, it says, come and visit us and sign our wall. They were like, well, we'll whitewash it once in a while. Yeah, so that's what you do. They actually encourage you to do it. So there's that. And the crossing itself, day or night, it doesn't matter. There are people walking in formation across that Abbey Road crossing.
I've seen it from a distance, but I couldn't really get that close.
Yeah, they have a webcam. Abbey Road Studios have a webcam that points at the crossing, and you could log on right now, wherever you're listening to this show, log on to the Abbey Road webcam, and there will be people wandering across that. And sometimes you look at it, I've looked at it a few times, and then there'll be a yellow submarine crossing it, or people dressed in some I don't know, Santa or something. It's just a thing, and apparently all the cab drivers and all the bus drivers hate it because it's a thoroughfare for that area. It's like a main road for that area, and all you get is tourists day and night.
I can see how that could be annoying, honestly. I understand why they're doing it as a Beatles fan. That's fun. And, me and my big, giant wooden yellow submarine running across the road. It's cute. Don't get me wrong. But as a bus driver just trying to get through my day, I could see how that would be kind of annoying.
Exactly.
Just saying. Well, Tim, you made this one more related to music for sure than the last one, but isn't Abbey Road, isn't there like a lot of other famous sites down like the road like that they've referenced in different Beatles things?
Probably. I mean, the other place I was going to come to, which is absolutely nowhere near Abbey Road, is Penny Lane. People routinely steal the signs, and in addition to that, they sign the signs that they've painted on the wall, so they have to redo them after a while. But what's cool is that Penny Lane still does have a barber showing photographs, or actually I think it was a hairdresser's, but it does have a hair emporium showing photographs.
Yeah, I've seen it on Carpool Karaoke when they had Paul McCartney on. He goes into the barbershop, and it's a lady. I think it's just a hair salon. I'm not sure it's necessarily a barbershop, but he comes in and talks to her. And the reason I associated this with Tim had told me the story about the two different signs and the signing. I got them mixed up. But I mean, that makes sense. Either anything that's iconic want to be all over it at any given time. So, but no, and then isn't there? And then I don't know where Eleanor Rigby is. Is there a location associated with Eleanor Rigby? Yeah,
Eleanor Rigby. Eleanor Rigby was a gravestone in a graveyard in Liverpool. I don't know if it's still there. Maybe it is still there. But John Lennon and Paul McCartney walking to school used to walk through a church graveyard, and it was one of the headstones, and it said Eleanor Rigby, and that's where that name comes from.
That's what I thought. I remember you saying something about that. There's a physical location. Of course, I'm guessing that headstone's probably not there anymore.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Tim, what do you mean you don't know every headstone that's in England? Isn't that part of your thing you're supposed to know? My obligation. By obligation, you're supposed to know every location that a Beatles memorabilia happened. And so Apple Studios, where is Apple Studios at?
All right, Apple Studios was on Savile Row. Now, Savile Row, I've been there too. Savile Row was famous, it still is famous. It's the district of London where all the tailors were located. So if you want to get a fancy suit made, Savile Row would be the finest suits, and the finest clothing would come from Savile Row. And the Beatles bought that building, which was their Apple building, which had Apple Studios in the basement. And that is the building where, up on the roof, they did the rooftop concert.
Which is my favorite thing ever. And my favorite concert, my favorite version of Get Back was done on the concert that day. And I've told Tim this before, if you want to read a book, there's this book, her name's Miss Odell. She was somehow, I don't remember, she worked at Apple Studios. I can't remember her exact association with it. But she's the one that's sitting by Yoko Ono, the lady sitting by Yoko Ono on the rooftop. Mm-hmm. On the final farewell tour. And she was, because she worked in Apple Studios, she was around all these musicians all the time. And she has all these stories to tell from anybody from Bob Dylan to the Beatles, basically, because they were all in and out. And she talks about a lot of artists would go to the bathroom and would perform in the bathroom because of the acoustics. It was a big deal for them when she worked at Apple Studios. And so she talks about that. And then she talks about like when George Harrison went on his giant religious type endeavor he went through, and came back from India, and he was Buddhist or whatever. I don't remember. Was it Buddhism? Whatever he was. Hinduism?
I think he was into Buddhism. I think that's what he was into.
That might be it. But if you guys know, please don't judge me. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But that book is fantastic. And she's got like every musician that came in and out of Apple Studios she worked with. And so she talks heavily about it. And it's just cool because at the final end of the book, she's the one sitting on the rooftop. And I had no idea. I've seen that concert a few times. I absolutely adore that concert. It's one that when it comes on, I crank up because I think the music was so good. I don't know why. It was one of their most passionate ones. But she was the lady sitting on the rooftop.
There we go.
But I don't know why it always stuck out to me that she thought it was rated that a lot of musicians would go in Apple Studios and record in the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, it would have, you would assume it would have some kind of ceramic tiling or something, which would make a very good environment for
bathrooms
reverb.
are notorious for that. Bathrooms are notorious for having really good acoustics. But she just talked about, she said it happened a lot there. Theirs were apparently really good.
There we go.
And she was at a lot of parties.
Well, there we are. Well, we're going to leave Liverpool, and we're going to leave Savile Row, and we're going to leave St. John's Wood. And we're probably going to get on a rock and roll aeroplane. And this time, we're going to go to Canada.
Okay.
And in Canada is Niagara Falls, which is just at the border of New York State. Niagara Falls, Canada, Niagara Falls, US. But we are on the Canadian side. And I last visited there in 2019 for my birthday. But we're not going to worry about Niagara Falls or Niagara on the Lake or any of that cool stuff there. We're going to go to a small little town somewhere outside there called St. Catharines. And St. Catharines is like a residential retail type environment. And we're going to go to the Eaton Centre. Eaton Centre being what we would say here, a cookie cutter large mall. And in the Eaton Centre is a record shop. And I bought a Rush album on vinyl there. And that is your rock and roll collection, ladies and gentlemen.
I like that. So what I find very interesting about this is Tim can really identify where he's bought things. Like, I don't know that I can identify as well where I've picked up the things in my life as Tim can. Which Rush album was it, though?
It was the Moving Pictures.
So I have a very funny story about Rush, not related to Canada, but it is about Rush. So once again, we're going to go to Family Guy. There's a Family Guy joke where Peter is wearing he's wearing his khaki pants that he always wears on Family Guy. And they're at a Rush concert, and it's like it shows a bunch of guys in the audience. It's all men, and they're all wearing black jeans. It's like, this is what it's like to be the only guy at a Rush concert wearing khakis that didn't vote for, what was that third party candidate who ran for president?
Yes.
Oh, that's going to kill me. Hold on. I'm going to look it up.
I know the guy, not Newt Gingrich?
No. He's the one that didn't know the name of any other country or something. It's recent.
Ralph Nader.
No, hold on. He did run, but that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Joy frantically looking this up in the Google machine.
Not Joe Jarrett. She did run, but she was the. Oh, that's gonna kill me. Third party candidate. But anyway, it was like all the dads wearing, he was like, it's the only one to be wearing khakis and a black jean and being the only person who didn't vote for this candidate at a Rush concert. And then somebody in the back just yells, play Tom Sawyer. Okay. I'm going to keep looking.
And funnily enough, Moving Pictures is the one that has Tom Sawyer on it. And I bought two things in that record shop. I decided I was only going to buy stuff from a Canadian artist, so I bought the Rush album. But then I rifled through their used bin of stuff, and what did I find? I found a mint Canadian pressing of Don Johnson's first album.
Oh, wow. That's random. Mint Canadian pressing of Don Johnson's first album. Where did you find this at?
In the same shop, in the Eaton Centre.
At the same shop?
And it was $5 Canadian. And I took it to the counter, and the lady scanned in my Rush album very knowingly. Oh, you're in Canada and you're buying a Rush album. Fantastic. And then I handed her this one, and she looked at me funny, and I said, I'm buying this for comedy value. And she said, yes, of course you are.
That's funny. Take it. I had the guy's name up, but now I forgot what it was while you were telling that. Oh, no, I just saw it. What is that guy's name? Not Tom Johnson. I just looked right at his name. Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson. There you go.
Gary Johnson was the guy. So it was from the Libertarian Party, which we don't really have to get into it. But that was the joke, is to be the only guy at a Rush concert not wearing black jeans and didn't vote for Gary Johnson.
There we go.
So for some reason now Eric's about to think of Rush. And so they're making the joke. And then, of course, someone in the back screams, "Play Tom Sawyer." But I was listening to you, but I was Googling that. So that's why I was like, did he say he found that at the same? Because it's kind of a random. So this is when you went to Niagara Falls and you just happened to end up at this specific shop, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, I've been to Niagara, Canada and Niagara Falls and St. Catherine and Niagara Lake. I've been there a few times. But gotcha. I remembered that shopping mall was there. And we went there because that shopping mall has got a Canadian Walmart in it. And what I wanted to do was buy Canadian candy for my dish at work.
You know what was really weird to me? And maybe this is my ignorance, but my first time traveling outside of the United States, I thought it was really weird when I came across the border. You know, customs ask you like weird questions, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they just ask you random stuff, just trying to see if you'll slip up. Well, I just thought it was weird how long they spent wondering if I was bringing back like unpasteurized food. Like they were so serious. Are you bringing back any fruits, any cheeses, any of this, any of that? And I was like, of all the things you're worried about if I bring back some unpasteurized cheese, but they really were. I thought that was incredibly random.
Well, I think, they're looking for drugs and they're looking for weapons and they're looking for fugitives and all that stuff. But I think the bigger threat is bringing things in that are outside the ecosystem.
Yeah, there's remember like that Australian like plants and stuff, especially like ones in Australia. Hawaii's big on that too. They have like their own plants that are specific to Hawaii. And if you bring stuff in, it can ruin their ecosystem.
Yeah, and in fact, I went to Australia in 1998. I haven't been back since. I'd like to go. I keep meaning to go back at some point, but I will do when it isn't quite as expensive to travel back there. But I went in 1998, and I don't know if they still do this, but what they used to do is you would land in Australia, and before you deplane, they would come through with these aerosol disinfectants and spray them over your head in the cabin to disinfect you before you was allowed to step off the plane.
See, what you don't know is that they adopted that again, but that's just because of COVID. Yeah,
they could be like doing it now anyway, but I was told it would happen before I went because a friend of mine had traveled to Australia a number of times, but they tell you on the thing, and they tell you to, cover your face and close your eyes, and they...
I wonder if anybody's like ever passed out or something.
I'm sure whatever they're spraying is not just like neat Clorox. I'd imagine it's some kind of formulation that you can breathe it and it's not going to kill you. Maybe it will. I don't know. But they also showed a video as the plane was coming into land about bringing meats and cheeses and wood carvings and things that you wasn't supposed to bring into Australia because it would mess up their ecosystem.
I know. I guess I was ignorant to that at that point. Of all the things that they could ask me about, I just thought that was so random. Now I get it. And remember, Johnny Depp got in a lot of trouble because he wasn't supposed to bring his dog or something. It was an animal.
He had being Johnny Depp, having Johnny Depp money, he chartered a private jet, I think, from the US to Australia for some film he was making. And he brought his dog with him. And, of course, it landed at a private airstrip and all this stuff. And then he was there for a number of days or weeks. And then they found out that he had his dog with him and it hadn't gone through quarantine.
Yeah.
So, certainly in England, it used to be if you brought a pet into England, it had to sit in quarantine for 6 months or 3 months or something. And I think Australia is almost the same thing if you import a pet in for the same reason. So he circumvented that. And the only reason they didn't confiscate and destroy the dog is because he agreed to do some PSA work with them or do some kind of goodwill work to make it right.
Well, and because he was Johnny Depp.
Yeah, absolutely. If it was like Rich Bob who chartered an airplane, I'm sure that wouldn't have happened. But, the kudos of Johnny Depp going on their TV and saying, hey, I messed this up. Don't you mess it up. The ecosystem's important. Yeah,
I just remember that being a big thing. And I'm very happy nothing bad happened to the dog, of course, because it was at his owner's expense. You know what I mean? It's not the dog's fault.
Sure, absolutely.
But, I just remember that being a thing. Not that was music related at all, but I just thought it was random. They really wanted to know if I was bringing unpasteurized cheese back with me.
There we go.
I just did. But now I've done it a few times. It doesn't shock me. When I went to Greece, they didn't ask me anything. The guy just kind of stared at me and handed me my passport back.
There you go.
I don't think he asked me anything.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to bring this leg of the rock and roll road trip to a close with one more stop. Now, I've got a number of other places. I may revisit this topic again in the future, but this will be our final stop on the rock and roll road trip. And this is from 2015, which I think was the last time I went there. I may have gone since. I honestly can't remember. But we're going down to Florida. Now, as we may have discussed on Freak Jam Zoom chats, our friends in England mostly think of Florida as Disney, theme parks, and stuff like that.
And Joy was born there, if that matters.
But people in the United States know that there's a lot of wacky stuff that goes down in Florida. We don't need
all the weird crimes.
Yeah, we don't need to extrapolate on that, though. The whole Florida Man game, and if you haven't, our listeners who haven't played that, what you do is you put in your birthday and Florida Man into Google, and you see what the first story that comes up. And it's normally like mutant zombie gator with knife murders man and then eats man by cooking him in microwave while wife is naked in the garden. It's like you can't make this stuff up, and that's what it's like.
Tim even that one's pretty tame compared to some of the ones I've seen.
Exactly.
And ironically, I've been to Florida every year of my childhood, though I never saw any gators eat anybody. Didn't see that.
Well, anyway, we're gonna steer the road trip away from wacky Florida stuff, but we're gonna go down to Disney, and we're gonna go to Disneyland's Magic Kingdom, and we are gonna go on a ride with a very irritating song that plays in the background. That once you hear it, you could never ever get it out your brain ever again.
It's a small world after all.
It is a small world after all.
It's a small world after all. So I've been to technically it's Disney World, Tim. You're in Florida. Land is in California. Get it right. We're going to get specifics here. This is the one thing I knew, guys. Let me have it. Okay. Anyway. So no, it's a small world after all. I thought for a second, though, Space Mountain plays Aerosmith. I don't know if you've been on Space Mountain or not, but they play Aerosmith when you're going through. Yeah,
I haven't been on Space Mountain because I don't like roller coasters because my back is dodgy. And the last roller coaster I went on was Universal Studios Hollywood, and it was the Jurassic Park log flume. And it's much like every other log flume. It takes you up and then it drops you down, and it gets to the bottom, it splashes. But they'd really up the ante with it, and the most of the climb is in complete darkness. And there's a big T-Rex goes rah, and then it drops. It's almost like a sheer drop. And when this thing hit the bottom, it went bang. And I don't think my lower back has been the same ever since.
That sounds about right. Yeah. No, well, it's a small world after all. I've heard a million times before, and it's referenced on everything. And it's one of the original rides of Disney. Mm-hmm. So when like Disney was still Disney back in the day, and it had like a very small, because Magic Kingdom's the original piece of Disney World. Mm-hmm. It's a small world after all. It's been one they've redone over and over. So it's one of the original rides. But yeah, if you go on Space Mountain, which is, for those who've never been to Disney World, it's an indoor roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And you start and they pull you up to the thing, and then it just like, weirdly enough, Aerosmith comes across the screen and they said something about a band or something, and then they jettison you out, and then like London in an elevator screaming at you through the entire roller coaster. It's true. And you're in the dark. But I was part of this program when I was in high school, because I went with one of my, because I told you guys I used to travel with choirs. With my honors choir that I was with, we went to Disney. We were at Orlando performing, and we went to Disney World. Well, they signed us up for this program. It's called the Yes Science program, and it gets you into the parks before. So, and then they go around and they teach you things about science and velocity and roller coasters and yada, 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 which is also how I learned that It's a Small World After All was one of the first that was open. Mm-hmm. Well, they brought us into Space Mountain without the lights off and the Aerosmith screaming at you and stuff. It's a giant warehouse. And like, you're like, this is what it looks scary because it looks much scarier without the lights on, because like you're like flying past a wooden box like hanging down right beside your head. If you were 2 feet taller, you're gonna lose an eye. Like there's wires hanging down, like because there's no lights and there's a strobe effect when it's, you know, when it's doing the Aerosmith thing. Well, it might not always be Aerosmith. They might change the artist. That's just the one that was there when I was there. And it may not always have music. I don't know. But anyway, when the lights go off and the lights start flashing at you and Love in an Elevator is what's chanting at you as you're being thrown across the thing, you don't see all this. But when they turn the lights on, there's like a box beside your head. There's like a pointy wire that's halfway off. And you're like, I remember thinking, oh my God, how are these, like, how is this legal? Because I guess you don't really put it in perspective. And that was the moment that I'm like, okay, because roller coasters only go like 30 miles per hour. It's all about like the centrifugal force and the, like your brain thinks you're going faster than you are and stuff. So that's what they were teaching us about. And they were bringing us around in the dark and they're showing us different things and saying, this is how fast you're actually going at this moment. But it's just a giant warehouse. Yeah.
And I will also say that for our friends in England who grew up in the, well, were of age, in maybe a teenager in the 80s or maybe the 90s, at Thorpe Park, which is a theme park which is not far from where I used to live in West London, they had a ride called Space Station Zero, which was essentially the same idea as the one that you was mentioning at Disney, Space Mountain.
Yeah.
However, it probably wasn't as good quality. And I think actually it was just some old junky roller coaster in the dark.
I'm pretty sure that well, I mean, basically when they turn the lights on, that's all Space Mountain was too. I was very shocked. Disney, I guess, though, if you don't have to, but I mean, it legitimately looked like I was riding in a warehouse around like what I thought was like this cool thing. But yeah, it's, I mean, with the music blaring and the lights off, you never know.
Well, there we
are. That's what
I
remember.
Well, I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, with joy destroying the magic of Disney, I think we're going to end the rock and roll road trip right there, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
See ya.